And when he caught his breath, he said, "That's the funniest tie I've ever seen. I don't know who I'm going to give them to, but I want you to individually gift box 2 dozen of them and send them to my office," which I did. But he also said, the difference in sophisticated humor and bad taste is who and where.
Today, I'm joined by Paul Winston, a seasoned entrepreneur and clothier, and one of the most interesting guys I know. Paul takes us through a journey through his remarkable career and personal anecdotes. Paul unveils the saga of his family businesses, Chipp of New York, a bespoke tailor shop that blossomed into an iconic producer of whimsical ties and boxer shorts under the renowned brands Chipp Neckwear and Chipp Boxers. Drawing from his encounters with luminaries like the Kennedys, John F. Kennedy and his brothers, David Rockefeller, Paul offers insights into the intricacies of catering to a high-profile clientele. Paul shares about his interactions with famous clients, showcasing his dedication to discretion and personalized service, hallmarks that set his business apart in the fashion industry. From crafting custom attire for Bobby Kennedy to sharing moments of levity with Tom Watson, Paul paints a vivid tapestry of the personal connections that defines his illustrious career, showcasing the delicate balance between humor and respect that he masterfully maintained. As our dialogue winds down, Paul shares details about his current ventures, where he continues to offer his distinctive ties and boxer shorts to discerning customers. He emphasizes the importance of security and customer privacy in online transactions, inviting listeners to explore his offerings through his websites. Through his entrepreneurial zeal and innovative designs, Paul continues to make an indelible mark on the fashion landscape, seamlessly blending traditional craftsmanship with contemporary humor and style. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hero of the Hour podcast. I'm Mark Murphy, the founder and CEO of Northeast Private Client Group and the author of my third book, the #1 bestseller, The Ultimate Investment. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here with a very, very special guest, my friend Paul Winston. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Paul, I want to tease our audience a little bit about what your company does, because I think it's the most clever, funniest concept I've ever heard, and I love what you do. I don't want to tell them up front, but we'll get to it pretty quickly. I'd love to tell you that just for somebody like yourself, just tell people, give them a little a snippet of kind of where you got started, where you are right now, and then we'll talk about where your company and where it's going.
Well, my dad started a company called Chipp of New York, which was a custom tailor. We had a full retail business. We owned our own little building in New York City across the street from Brooks Brothers. And we were privileged to deal with a rather amazing mix of customers. And I joined him in 1960 when I finished school. And we were selling a lot of ties at the retail level. And I went to him one day and I said, "Hey, we're selling a lot of ties. We ought to start to make them ourselves." So he said, "Well, then start a company and make them." So I did. And I created a company called Chipmunk Creations, again, using the chip with the 2 P's, which evolved into Chipp Neckwear, which still exists today. And Chipp Neckwear, with the times, is sort of like being in the buggy whip business, since most men don't wear neckties with the frequency that they used to. And because I'm 85 and still looking for something to do, I started another company called Chipp Boxers. And the designs on on my novelty ties, and the designs on my boxers are my pride and joy because I think they're funny. Not
They
everyone
are.
does.
They are. They're
Uh,
hysterical.
so I'm now running both of those companies. The Chipp boxes has just begun, and the Chipp Neckwear, which at one time did on our website uh, hundreds of orders a week, now gets a few orders a week because most men aren't wearing neckties.
Well, that is true. I'm going to get to your company in a minute because I think when people see your product, they're not going to walk; they're going to run to buy it like I did. But I want people to know more about who you are. I know you're a history buff. I know you're very interested in the Kennedy administration and how politics intersect life. Love to tell people a little bit about your, why you're passionate about history.
Well, the Kennedy family, the Rockefellers, the Watsons, uh, were all customers of ours.
By the way,
And
a lot of people know who everyone knows who the Kennedys are. Or I think virtually everyone knows who the Rockefellers are. Who are the Watsons? Tell them.
well, that was Tom and Arthur Watson of IBM, not the golfer. And I was fortunate to get to spend an awful lot of time with all of them. And one of my favorite sort of things that I often tell people about was that David Rockefeller, even when I was a kid, insisted on calling me Mr. Winston, which made me feel immensely uncomfortable. Because if anyone else said Mr. Winston, I looked over my shoulder to see if my father was there. And even today at 85, when someone calls me Mr. Winston, I'm sort of surprised. But President Kennedy, when I was with him any number of times, he called me Paul. Cy Vance called me Paul. Uh, the Watsons, Henry Ford, uh, these were the people that I was privileged to spend time with. And in my years in the business, uh, what I liked most about the business was dealing with people. And I don't just mean the names I just name dropped there. I can name drop with anyone in the world because
By the
I've
way,
just
I
given
think
you a few names.
people love name droppers. They say they don't, and then they love all the anecdotes about all the rich and famous people you've worked with. But I think any anecdote would be sucked up like a sponge.
Well, one anecdote that I always that was one of my favorites was that David Rock. When we made custom clothing, an individual would pick their cloth out, and the price, whether we were making the garment out of really expensive cloth or less expensive cloth, the cost of making it was the same. So what drove the price of any garment was in fact the cloth that was selected. And my father told me, remember, David Rockefeller only wants to buy the opening range cloth. And one day when my dad was down south, and Mr. Rockefeller came in, and I was working with a customer, and he said, "I need 3 suits," and I said, "Well, I'll be with you shortly." And he said, "Well, I'll go up front and pick the cloths out," and he went up front. And then when I was finished with the customer with whom I was working, I went up front, and there were the 3 cloths that he had picked. And I said, "Mr. Rockefeller, I want you to know that this particular cloth is more expensive than the other two. That's a more expensive cloth." So he said, "Well, then I'll pick something else." And he, at that time, was the richest man in the world. And he denied himself something he liked because it was $50 more expensive. And my father always had said to me, you know, his choice is a real compliment to us because he feels he doesn't have to pay extra to get as good as he can get.
Gotcha.
And I always remembered that story to think that he said, "Gee, I'll pick something else," which he did.
Tell me about your father and your relationship with Bobby Kennedy and JFK. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the whole Kennedy family, with the exception of Teddy, were all customers of ours, and uh, my father uh, knew him from when he was in prep school, and uh, of course, when he was the president, he didn't come into the store. My father would either go to the White House, or we would meet him at the Carlisle Hotel, where they had an apartment on the top floor. But Bobby would come in. He would often come in, real easygoing. Even when he was Attorney General, he'd come into the store with one man with him. Had parked his old green Chevrolet that they drove in on Madison Avenue, and he'd come in. Uh, and they were always very, very easygoing and very, very friendly, and as were all of our customers, because even though some of them had a reputation of being very difficult people or within their own business world, when they were dealing with us, they were dealing in a different world. It was something that they enjoyed doing. They liked clothing, which is why they were coming to us, and they had faith that what we were turning out for them was, as good as they could get. Another really, really good stories. We spent a lot. We got to spend I and my father a lot of time with Tom Watson, and he would come in and sit with my father 2 or 3 times a year for an hour or two, because he wanted to be in the clothing business. And although working for IBM had a reputation of you have to wear a black suit and a white tie, he himself, in his own personal leisure time, liked really wild, fun things. And he would sit and talk with my father. And then after my dad died, he would do it with me. And a couple of times a year, we'd sit for a couple of hours and talk about uh, clothing, and he would make suggestions. And my father said to me once, "What do you think would happen if you called IBM and you said, I'll make a $20,000 donation to the charity of Mr. Watson's choice, if he'll come in and consult with me about my business for an hour?" He said, "What do you think the chances are that he would do that?" He said, and yet there he was doing it with my dad 2 or 3 times a year, doing it with me after my dad passed. And he had an absolutely great sense of humor. I have stories that I can tell you about him that no one knows that he would tell me. But one thing in particular, because it sort of illustrated something that meant something to me in terms of my tie business and in terms of my boxer shorts, which we'll talk about later. But I can tell you that he had a meeting with me at one point. He had a heart attack the year before. He's still walking with a cane. And we were just talking about clothes, and he was telling me things. Uh, and when he was about to leave, I said, "Mr. Watson, I'm going to show you something really funny." And he said, "Okay." And I showed him my tie, which has men's heads with a cat on each man's head.
And by the way, for our viewers, I want to tell you that Paul has one of the most wicked senses of humor of all time, and
Okay, so this is that
really
tie.
bawdy too.
And I said, "Mr. Watson, that's a tie for a man with nothing on his mind but pussy, because it's the men's head with cats on their head." He started laughing so hard, I was afraid he was going to have another heart attack. And when he caught his breath, he said, "That's the funniest tie I've ever seen. I don't know who I'm going to give them to, but I want you to individually gift box 2 dozen of them and send them to my office," which I did. But he also said, "The difference in sophisticated humor and bad taste is who and where."
Right.
So when Tom Watson gave that tie to someone as a gift, that was sophisticated humor.
Yes.
But you couldn't put that tie on the counter in Nordstrom's or Bloomingdale's or anyplace else, because that would be bad taste. And that's what rolls over into many of my novelty ties have messages that qualify. And And my boxers also have printed on them a couple of my tie designs in the same category. Not everyone thinks they're funny. For example, my wife thinks that they're stupid and in bad taste. But 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 a lot of
She's
other
wrong in my
really
opinion.
really well-known people don't think that. Uh, and when we did our recent promotion, where we sent out emails to people who had bought ties from us through the years and showed them the boxes on it, and someone sent me an email, and they said in the email, and I quote, they said, "This is stupid, and you are the source of the problems." And what I thought was, gee, I can't think of how I could possibly be the source of the problems down in the border or what's going on in the Middle East. And if he says I'm the source of the problems, I guess he somehow thinks I'm have an effect on those things.
Yeah,
But that to me, I do these things and I create these things because I think they're funny and I'm doing them for me. And I don't think I'm going to sell thousands of them, and I'm not concerned about selling thousands of them. By today's standards, I'm far from a rich man, but at the age of 85, I got enough to make it to the end, and I'm doing these things because it's fun, and I think everyone should have some fun in life.
we'll probably I'll have my media people put up the tie itself. But I think I love that the tie you showed before. The tie I love the best because it's just so darn clever. It was if anyone remembers playing the TV show Concentration. Paul has a baseball tie that would put concentration to shame. You want to tell me how you came up with that tie because it's so darn clever.
Well, it happens to be the tie that I'm wearing here, and it's called the baseball score. And of course, it starts with the time on the clock. So the baseball score is 5-4. And next, there's a bottle on its side with whiskey having fallen out. So it's the bottom of the fifth. Then there's a woman with one breast exposed. So that's one out.
Right.
And then there's a toilet with no one on it. So it's 5-4, bottom of the fifth, one out, no one on. One day, a customer walked in. I didn't know who he was, and he was wearing that tie. And he said, you are the people who made this tie. I said, yes, yes, we are. And he said, well, I need 4 dozen of them. And I said, 4 dozen of them? You must own a baseball team. And he said, I do. And it was the owner of the Jets, of the Mets. And he became a very, very good customer over the years. And my ties often led to people coming in who didn't know what we were doing, didn't even know that we were in the clothing business. But Nelson Doubleday, uh, who then said, "Well, gee, what else do you guys do?" And I said, "Well, we make clothes." And I took him upstairs, and he ordered a jacket, and he became, beside fun to do business with, he became one of our very most valued customers, not because of what he bought for himself, but he thought what we were doing was so good that he used to give away a lot of gifts. And he would give many people the gift of a custom jacket.
How many versions of ties do you have and boxers that people can buy from just the very clever to the very bawdy to the to I know you're also a big dog and animal lover, so you also have some animal ties that are sweeter.
Well, we do about 90 breeds of dogs on ties. And at one point, that was an amazing amount of business that we used to do. Uh, I'm making less ties now because less people are wearing them. So we have about 15 ties on there. We're sort of well known for our grenadine ties, but the novelty ties are the things I like. And there's about 10 or 12 of those. And the boxer shorts, which is a new one, a new business. I just started with 2 because I'm a believer in dip your toe in the water first, and uh, you know, controlling Who knows if it's going to work or not going to work? There are more things than can happen that do happen. Uh, and I don't know whether, quite frankly, if suddenly thousands of people wanted to order these, that would be a problem for me. Because I'm running the thing myself, and I do the shipping myself, and we make them, and it would be a funny situation when you say, "Well, gee, I hope too many people don't order them."
The all I can say is that I've given dozens and dozens of your ties and now boxers as gifts, and I have to say that people don't like them; they love them, and they're just so clever, and so irreverent, and if they don't want to be clever or irreverent or bawdy, sometimes they could buy the everyone loves their animal and the dogs, but just continue on with the life you've had, which is pretty rich. What's your connection to the 21 Club in New York, which I know recently closed during COVID?
Well, Pete Crindler was had known my dad for years, and he was a valued customer, and and of course, back in those days, uh, you had to wear a jacket and tie if you were going into 21, or if you were going into the Harvard Club or the New York Yacht Club. Uh, and when we lived in Connecticut all our life, but when we moved to New Jersey, which was about 18 years ago, to take care of our firstborn grandchild, um, there were 3 or 4 very nice restaurants in town. Which, if you went into them, there was a sign in the door that said "jacket and tie required." Today, you can go into those restaurants in your boxer shorts if you want.
Right.
But at any rate, the 21 Club had blazers, Chipp blazers, in the back room in every size, so that if someone arrived who didn't have a jacket and tie, they would give them one to wear to allow them into the restaurant. And um, one day, my dad said, "Gee, Mister Krindler called, and he needs some boxers. He needs you to run them over right away." So I said, "Fine," and I went over, and he had me go into his office, and and I was sort of well known within our operation as having a really messy desk, and people thought that my God, how can you know what he's doing? He's got stuff all over his desk. And my father said to me, "Well, what'd you think of Pete Krindler's office?" And I said, "Let me tell you something. Pete Krindler's office made me look like I'm a compulsive meatnik." I said, "That was the messiest office I've ever seen in my life." I said, "And what's more, the place was covered with these imitation Remingtons all over. He had his hat on one, he had his coat on one, he was using them all over." And my father laughed, and he said, "Imitations? Those weren't imitations, because those were originals."
Wow.
and I and of course they had the Remington room, and he did have an amazing collection of original Remington sculptures there. So that was our connection with 21.
Yeah.
Now, one day, Bobby Kennedy came in, and he didn't have a tie on, and Pete Kremmer's. I'm not sure if it was his nephew who was at the door, because Mr. Kremmer wasn't there, and and Bobby Kennedy was wearing a turtleneck, and he let him in without a tie. He said, "Oh my God, this is Bobby Kennedy." So he let him in without a tie. And then the next day, he told Pete Kremmer, "Bobby Kennedy was here last night, and I let him in without a tie because he was wearing a turtleneck." And Pete Kremmer was furious. And he said, "You never should have let him in without a tie. We have shirts and ties in the back. You should have made him put on a shirt and tie." He said, "And now that you let him in without a tie and with a turtleneck, I now have to let everyone who comes in with a turtleneck in." And that's what started the craze of turtlenecks in the 60s. And people then started wearing turtlenecks under their dinner clothes, and wearing turtlenecks instead of ties in their suits. And interesting connection to that and how it came to pass.
Well, I'm one of those people. I wore a suit and tie to work every day my first 25 years in the business, and now I'm lucky if I put a tie on once a month. Um,
Yeah.
and But I still wear boxers. So I think that you're staying ahead of the times. Paul, as somebody who is a confidant and a clothier to the rich and famous, one of the things I also appreciate about you is, any of the stories you tell are stories that, they would not only most of these people not with us anymore, but they would be happy that you told those stories. Meaning you're not telling any salacious details of their life or anything like that. Um, Obviously, one of the reasons you had all these folks was because you had confidentiality, meaning you were you were somebody that protected their privacy. Tell us a little bit of how that played into your business and how that played into your ethics.
Well, like my dad always thought that it would be terrible to take pictures with famous people and so forth. He thought that was in really, really bad taste. He felt that people had a right to their total privacy. And it wasn't like they were coming and telling us secrets or anything like that. I mean, although my father was in the White House with Bobby Kennedy, President Kennedy, and Cy Vance, who was Secretary of the Army in the Kennedy administration, and they were in the not in the Oval Office, but in the television room watching when they were sending the troops into to let the guy into the law school down there, and they were watching this while they were ordering suits. But we never told things about any of our customers, and they didn't tell us things that there would even be to tell. We weren't interested in those. We weren't looking for secrets from anybody. We were thrilled to get to deal with everyone who came in the door, including the famous people. And the first time that I got to meet him, I never went to the White House, but the first time that I went over to the Carlisle with my dad and our fitter, and we had a briefcase, and we were carrying a bag with his fittings, a clothing bag, and and Charlie, our designer, came out, and he was a camera buff, and he had a camera around his neck. And my father said, "Charlie, what's that?" And he said, "It's a camera, Sid. I'm going to take a picture of the president when we're over there." And my father said, "Charlie, lose the camera." And we never took pictures like that. As a matter of fact, we only took a picture of, there was only, in all the years that I was doing it, I only took a picture of one man. And that was uh, after uh, uh, Colonel Aldrin got back from the moon. He was appearing in a commercial for Volkswagen, and they sent him in for us to make a suit for him. And just by the purest of chance, when he came in for us to take the measurements and so forth, my wife was there, and our infant daughter, who was only a few months old, she was there with our infant daughter. So I asked Buzz Aldrin if he would please let me take a picture of him holding my daughter. So I had a picture. I took a picture of him holding my daughter with my father standing next to him, the three of them. And then when he came back for the fitting, I had that picture. And I asked him to write on the picture, Mariana, that's my daughter's name. There was
A
nothing, no one like
Yale-educated
you on the
doctor.
moon. Yes, yeah. They said there was no one like you on the moon. So that was the only time we ever took a picture with anyone, and we have that picture. I have a few other autographs that I collected. I would never just ask someone for an autograph. Like I would ask them, I would tell them what to write. I mean, because people who are in the limelight, everyone's running up to them all the time and ask them, "Oh, may I have an autograph?" And what do? They say, "Best wishes, so and so." But shortly after uh, Cy Vance uh, had negotiated the agreement between the Egyptians and the Israelis at Camp David, he came in and I went up to him, and I knew him quite well, and I said, uh, "Mr. I said, Mr. Vance, you have to do a favor for me. I want you to write a note to my kids. I want you to say, now that I've got the Israelis and the Egyptians to sign the peace accords, do you think I can get the three of you to stop fighting?" Which he did. And he wrote that and signed it, says, "I, Vance, Secretary of State," and so forth. So those are my collections. Other than that, I didn't ask people. We never asked people for autographs. We didn't ask people for anything that I wouldn't be allowed to say out in public. And I never, ever mentioned any, you'll notice that all of the people we're talking about are no longer with us. I would
Yes.
never mention anyone who I'm doing business with now or people who I know now.
As I said, we represent a number of celebrities and athletes, and I always ask them, always believe in confidentiality. Although sometimes they're more than happy. The stories are so flattering. They love you to tell the good stories. But I was just going to say this, and Paul, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but this is my last question for you because all I can tell you is I in all the years I've known you, I can tell you that I have never been to an event where I wore one of your ties, where somebody did not rip the tie off my neck and demand that I surrender my tie to them because they thought they were so clever. And I'm just telling people that everybody that is watching this podcast and everybody that can hear it today, I just want them to go order some ties and some boxers. I mean, remember, they're not going to rip your boxers off because you'll probably have pants on, but they'll rip your
Yeah.
tie off, I promise you. But anybody
Yeah.
who's looking to get a really clever gift that's different for the people they care about or the people they work with, for the right person, I have people have thanked me, and it was so unique, so different, and so relatively inexpensive, that it was just a win-win-win-win-win deal. So if people wanted to order a bunch of ties or want to order even one tie or order some boxers, how do they get a hold of you, Paul? How do they find your company?
Well, we have two websites. The boxers are on their own website, which is chippboxers.com, and Chip has two P's, CHIPP, boxers, BOXERS.com. And the ties are on chippneckwear.com, again with two P's,
CHIPP.
CHIPNECKWEAR.com. And also, on both of those sites, my phone numbers are listed. I like talking to people, and anyone who wants to call and talk to me, and they don't have to talk because they want to order something. As a matter of fact, I won't let people order stuff over the phone. I always ask people to order over the website because I don't want to know anyone's credit card number. And when people do call me sometime and say, "Hey, I want to give you my credit card number," I say, "No, please, just go to the website and do it." Because with what's going on today, where things get hacked and people suddenly say, "Oh my God, someone got my credit card number," they're never going to have gotten it from me because I'm never
Gotcha.
going to see their credit card. I'm never going to see their credit card number.
Well, we're going to put some ties up on the podcast and some comfort information. And I am telling you, I'm looking in the camera and I'm telling every one of you, I am literally going to hang up from this podcast today, and I'm going to the website right now, and I'm going to order a couple of dozen ties because I have at least a couple dozen friends that need a good laugh and need to know that somebody's thinking about them in a both a caring, loving, and irreverent way. So, Paul, thank you for bringing some great joy into my life with your very, very clever, facile mind. And I count myself lucky to count you as a friend.
Well, I thank you very much, and I've certainly enjoyed doing this.
Thank you again. Thank you, my friend.